Good morning. Hello, we're Team Echo here to present our findings from the case study for Brown Shoe Company, soon to be Caleres. My name is Garrett Fow.
Hi, I'm James Murray.
Hi, Andrew Reisinger.
And I'm Mark Bergler.
So just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be presenting today, first and foremost, we're going to give you a diagnosis of some of the macro-level challenges and remedies that we see being present in the European Union. Number two, we'll walk you through our selection of our promising markets through our quantitative methods. Number three, we'll give you some recommendations for ideal product mixes in these selected markets. And number four, we're going to run you through our forecasting to hit those financial benchmarks that are necessary to achieve the long-term objectives that were presented to us. So again, the macro level of the European Union, our four markets that we're going to walk you through, some market summaries, and then financial forecasts and some action items to take going forward.
So before we look at the four markets that we're going to be wanting to go into, we're going to look at some of the macro trends that are needed in order to find some success inside of the European market. And the first of those are some environmental factors. The chemical regulations such as REACH inside of the European Union is ensuring that there are harmful chemicals and products that are not going to be inside of your products. And this includes anything down your entire downstream supplier process. In the future, buyers are probably going to want evidence in that, and that's going to be useful as we're talking about the strategies that we want to introduce to bring products to Europe. And some updates are going to be in effect May 1st in 2015. Some of the banned substances are things in leather such as aromatic azodines and chromium-6, especially in Germany. And also in textiles, aromatic azodines insert in flame retardants. Some social factors are some potential opportunities that come along with having those kinds of regulations. For instance, with luxury customers, especially in Western Europe, they are cognizant of having that eco-friendly aspect to whatever that they're buying. And so that is an excellent branding opportunity. And some other branding opportunities that go along with that, of course, we've already talked about the eco-labeling, but also seeing where the origin of your product is. And that's something that's mandated by the European Union as well. And the last thing is corporate social responsibilities. Along with being kind of that eco-friendly brand, is also being able to be a brand that does good things for good people. And part of that is looking down your downstream supply and ensuring that you're analyzing and making sure that your suppliers are utilizing child labor to the least as they possibly can. Some political factors, you're going to be wanting to implement management systems. This goes along with being that eco-friendly and social responsible brand. You're going to be introducing ISO 14000, which is just ensuring that you're environmentally up to standards. OHSAS 18001, occupational health and safety, and making sure that's up to standard inside and outside of your organization. And SA 8000, ensuring that your social conditions within your organization and outside your organization, and creating that culture is something that's going to be pivotal in making your brand successful inside of the European Union. Some origin issues, making sure that you have free trade agreements with your manufacturing countries. For instance, I know that you guys have a manufacturer in Asia. Make sure that you have those kind of agreements to ensure that there's a good flow of your product into Europe. And also, there's going to be mandatory origin labels, as I said before. And also, the effect of the strong US dollar. So there is a negative consumer impact along with that. But that also creates the opportunity for capital expenditures in order to import that kind of money in order to make a very strong standing in there. We're going to talk about that later on in the presentation. Some technical factors. Everybody in the fashion industry is definitely impacted by fast fashion. Shorter, more frequent design periods and reduced development times. Now this is going to require some production improvements, maybe some things that you guys have already done, but things such as utilizing 3D printing in order to make the amount of money that it costs to prototype products, as well as how long it takes to get them visualized and into the market is something that can definitely be implemented. Logistics improvement, making sure that there's data interchange with your buyers using RFID and EPCs to ensure that they know where the product is and you're getting the product where it needs to be, when it needs to be there.
So as we started to wrestle with the data and really wrap our heads around the European market, we realized we needed to find some countries of entry with great potential. To wrap our heads around this, we created a quantitative model in order to find which countries we think are best for entry. We used two core metrics for this. The first one was our high growth in terms of consumption, and the second was a variable that we created ourselves called market fulfillment. Market fulfillment consists of net trade plus production over consumption. The idea of this variable is trying to figure out which markets are entirely unfulfilled and which ones have great entry in terms of our competition. So if we look towards our first quadrant, we can find high growth and low market fulfillment. These are countries we believe we need to enter first and that will have the greatest success with. They consist of Poland, Croatia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and Slovenia. Ones that we feel will be equally as strong will be the UK, Slovakia, Germany, and France. If you notice Slovakia towards the bottom, they have an extremely high growth rate at the moment, but they have high market fulfillment. We're going to see some great potential in Slovakia in the next coming years. And then we're going to go over 2 more metrics that we went over to find these countries. The next are the average number of footwear purchases per capita by year. As we can tell, high repurchability is important to the footwear market. And we found that France and the UK had the highest within these. If you see towards the bottom, we have something called EC, which is our Eastern core. These are countries with close proximity but have great potential for entering their markets. They consist of Slovakia, Bulgaria, Slovenia, Lithuania, Croatia, and Poland. The second metric we took into account was the percent of national footwear consumption done by women. We found that Germany had the highest with 61.8%, and our Eastern core also had similar percentages next to it.
So we're going to go through each country and geographic area in more qualitative approach going forward. While we're doing this, please keep in mind some of the points Mark made earlier as far as the macro trends in the European Union as a whole, and we'll go country by country to kind of go about a little bit more specific in each country and how that market differs from everyone else. So we're going to start off with the biggest one, which is the UK. On the far left, we have our key market indicators, which we're going to just be copying over from our previous charts. The MF is our market fulfillment. It's 0.37. The lower the number that is, the more that there's a need for them to have more shoes and footwear in the industry. The higher that is, that means it's more saturated. And then we have our compound annual growth rate of the consumer spending for footwear in that country, growing at 4.1%. Just doing a quick SWOT analysis. The biggest strength of the UK is it's a culture capital of the world. I mean, everyone in any country learns about London and all the culture that goes in there. It has a strong, rich history. And a big weakness to it is, unlike many of the other countries we're going over, it's not part of the Eurozone, so it has an isolated currency. That's something you have to take into consideration when you're going through hedging risks and different currency fluctuations in the market. One of the biggest opportunities, as we recently saw on the last slide, is at a high purchase rate per person for shoes. It was something like 5 pairs of shoes per year. So that's a customer they keep coming back and back each time of the year they need a new pair of shoes. And a big threat coming to the UK is that it has a weak consumer confidence in there. The whole economic climate in Europe has been pretty weak in the past couple of years, but it is on the uptick. The European Union still has a weak consumer confidence. So if we were to break down how we feel like we should be going into this market, we believe there should be a 60-40 split between the Naturalizer brand and the Sam Edelman brand. We believe for the Naturalizer brand, we should go pretty much straight wholesale on that. With the Sam Edelman brand, we believe it should be 40%, and then we should be going both wholesale and we should have a direct retail in there. We believe a strong flagship store in a city like London could really establish the brand in Europe. It's a strong culture capital, and having a nice consumer base there would really flow throughout the rest of Europe. And we believe that we should be doing that because the 40% is for those fashion-forward people in London. As we said, it's a culture capital, so people are really on to those hottest trends every season. And then the Naturalizers for the rest of the UK who just want fashionable, functional shoes that are comfortable for them. So if we go into the next country, which would be Germany, it's the second largest market in this area, we can see that their key market indicators are 0.38 for their market fulfillment and 0.3 for their compound annual growth rate. That's much smaller as a growth rate from the rest of the countries, but because it's such a large market, that still is a substantial growth in consumer spending each year. So if we go through the strengths, again, Germany is a culture capital. You have Munich, Frankfurt, all these countries like Berlin that have a strong, rich history and everything, and they're very fashionable cities as well. And then we go to their weakness. As Mark mentioned earlier, they have strict manufacturing regulations. Germany is one of the strongest proponents of all the regulations in the EU. They're really the ones to push that the strongest. And then the biggest opportunity is the trend is going towards industry concentration. On the surface, that might not seem like the best thing, but that's very good because it can have centralized distribution chains and supply chain management. And then the biggest threat with most of the Eurozone countries is the declining currency versus the US dollar. On the forefront, that's good for capital investment, but coming through consumer spending with the currency exchange rates, that might not be as advantageous as you would like. And we believe for Germany, there should be a split of 80% for the Naturalizer and 20% for the Sam Edelman. Germans really prefer function for their shoes. They're not too concerned with the hottest trends going forward. They really just want a comfortable shoe that's fashionable, that can get them through the day. And we believe wholesale through both of those would be a good option rather than having a direct retail presence in the country. So if we move on to France, which is the third largest market, we have a key market indicator for their market fulfillment as 0.36, which ends low as meaning that they need more footwear in that country, and their compound annual growth rate of 1%. If we look at their strengths, they are the fashion capital of the world. Paris is known across the world for being very fashion forward. They have all the luxury brands, and everyone there is really looking for fashion trends. The weakness is that their independent wholesale and retail outlets are actually starting to disappear. They're starting to be bought out by the big retail chains, and they're having larger retail companies there rather than smaller and small and medium enterprises in there. If we go towards the opportunity, France had the largest purchase rate of shoes per person in all of Europe. Again, as we mentioned earlier, that's very good for repeat customers. As you'll see later, those repeat customers are going to be very easy and instrumental towards the financial goals as we have. And the biggest threat is there's complex regulatory requirements within the European Union. Again, they're a strong voice in the European Union, and they're very forward with what they want, and they're very progressive in their industry needs. For France, because it's a high fashion, this is actually one of our largest markets for Sam Edelman. We believe it should be a 50-50 split. Again, we believe wholesale is the best option for this to mitigate some risks that could be coming forward in the next couple of years with the fluctuations in the European market. Naturalizers is for the rest of the people in France who are really just there for fashionable, comfortable shoes going forward, and there's a huge market for that as well. So then if we go to what we consider our little secret, the Eastern core, which consists of those Eastern European countries that we mentioned earlier, which is Croatia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Poland, and Bulgaria. There we go. These are all geographically together on one side, so we're considering them one geographic unit, and their land mass is about comparable to that of the other countries as well. We believe that the biggest strength is there's actually an unexpectedly high emphasis on fashion in countries like Slovakia. About 30 to 40% of their consumers said that's the top choice they go in when they're buying a shoe, which is higher than a lot of the other countries in Europe. And then the weakness is it's a high unemployment rate in there. It's a developing economy, so that's somewhat expected going forward. But the biggest opportunity is, as we had our graph earlier, all of these were on the high growth market and low market fulfillment, which pretty much means this industry is going to be growing in there, and no one's really there to fill it right now. So this is a prime opportunity for us to get in there and tap into the market. And then the biggest threat, as we mentioned earlier, is it's a developing market, so that is a little bit risky in there, both with the regime changes or any of the fluctuations in the economy. So if we were to go there, we believe that the best split would be the 80% naturalizer and 20% Sam Edelman, again going full wholesale and everything. We believe that 20% for the Sam Edelman is really crucial for a country like Slovakia, who's really looking for fashion-forward, trendy shoes, but then also the naturalizer brand is there for the rest of the European core, or sorry, the Eastern core, which is there for people who are getting enough money to start having disposable income to buy fashionable shoes, but they're there really just for the comfort and something that they can wear every day, rather than having some hot trend going that they'll need in another couple months to change out. So to summarize everything in here, we believe that the UK should be split 60-40 from naturalizer to Sam Edelman. We believe that the naturalizer should be pretty much wholesale directly, and then the Sam Edelman should be split with wholesale and a direct retail. We talked about a flagship store in London, how that would be a great opportunity. And then Germany could be split 80-20 for naturalizer to Sam Edelman. That's because the Germans are really there for function of shoes, comfort of shoes. They want something fashionable, but they're not onto the hottest trends every season. France, we should be split 50-50, again, wholesale. It's because France is the fashion capital of the world. They're really looking there for hottest trends. And then they're also there for the rest of the women working there who just want fashionable, comfortable shoes. And then the Eastern core, we believe should be split 80% naturalizer, 20% Sam Edelman. Wholesale there, we think wholesale there is pretty crucial. That really mitigates a lot of the risk with the developed economy. Rather than having a retail presence there, it's a little bit easier to go through the wholesale procedures. And the 20% there is, especially for those countries, we have a high emphasis on fashion and trends going forward rather than just form and function.
Right, so now that we've kind of seen what our product mixes are and our business strategies are in each of these markets, I'll give you an example of how this would actually play out in finances. So up here we have our forecast for the United Kingdom market, split between both the naturalizer brand and the Sam Edelman brand. So if we just walk through left to right, as you can see, that first column is total market consumption in the United Kingdom. So those are factors we calculated, and we have growth rates. Year 1 in this instance is going to be 2015. Year 5 is going to be all the way through 2020, so you can see that growth rate there. Percent female consumption is the percent of the footwear market shopping that's done by females. So they don't have 54.2% of females in terms of population, but they do a disproportionate amount of purchasing in the shoe market, as I'm sure you may realize. And then, so the margins, the naturalizer brand that's being pulled from the numbers we were given in our case study for wholesale operations And the same element margins were done by calculation using both wholesale operations and direct retail operations. And we had our sales and our gross profit numbers all the way to the right there. And the most important thing to note here in the center column is the local market share that's needed to reach those sales and gross profit margins. So if you look, we have 0.02% market share for the total market consumption for both the Naturalizer and Sam Edelman brands. So Brown Shoe Company as a whole would need to have about 0.04% total market share. And just to give you an idea of what that actually looks like in real numbers. So currently in the UK, there's about 31.5 million women. What that breaks down to when you have 0.04% is about 12,500 women per year visiting your brand. So that works out to about 1,050 women per month shopping at your stores. To reach those sales and gross profit goals with those types of consumer numbers, that basically works out to each consumer spending about $285 US between the Naturalizer and Sam Edelman brands per year, which we feel, given their high footwear turnover rate, they're buying about 5.4 shoes per person per year. That's a couple of boots per year. You're easily going to hit those sales goals in the United Kingdom market. Most of the other markets we have similarly low market shares in year one to kind of get you on the trajectory path towards the financial objectives we were given, and we have those tables as well in the appendixes. So the year-wide forecast, we took all of those revenues and profits and put them into kind of a full model here for you. So on the top we have our revenue forecast. You see the UK, Germany, France, and the Eastern Core. For the most part, our strategy is to place the high emphasis in the UK. It's the biggest footwear market in Europe and looks to be growing as one of the fastest, so it'll probably be the top dog for quite some time. And then we have that about 30% weighting. Germany and France both about 27, 28%, fluctuates slightly. And then the Eastern Core is going to kind of be our ace in the pocket. That's going to be growing, especially as time moves forward. We think that would be a good opportunity to raise more than 15% in terms of strategy, after 2020, maybe 10, 15 years down the line as it continues to grow. And you can see the numbers there give us our projection of over $30 million in wholesale revenue at the end of year 5, which meets our objective there. And then down below, you can see our profit forecast. Similar breakdown, total profit of about $8.5 million at the end of year 5. So if we take all of those profits and pull them back to the present value using a discount rate, in terms of today's dollar value through year 5, that gives us about $20.25 million in US dollars in today's terms. So in order to hit that 15% return on invested capital that we were given, that means we would have to spend a max of about $17.5 million. So essentially, unless you can implement these wholesale and retail initiatives in these countries in today's dollars, you should only do it if you can do it for less than $17.5 million. Otherwise, you're not going to hit that ROIC rate that was set out to us previously in the case. And then all these models run with about a direct profit contribution of close to 28% to reach all of those numbers that we had shown previously. So a couple of action items to take away as we determine how we're going to actually get on the ground and start operations in the UK, Germany, France, and the Eastern Core. So first of all, we really want to stress that to take advantage of the strong US dollar. Obviously, foreign exchange markets, they can fluctuate pretty quickly due to political trends. So you want to make sure you get on that wagon as soon as possible, take advantage of the capital investments that you'll need to make early on, even though the consumer spending may not pick up for a couple of years. Number 2, we recommend that you mobilize a wholesale partnership process. Obviously, wholesale is the biggest part of our market entry strategy in the European Union. So you want to make sure you line up your partners and get those programs started as quickly as possible. Number 3, we recommend that you begin due diligence on the UK retail presence, so that flagship store, any other retail stores in large UK metropolitan areas. Obviously, real estate retail takes some time to do your due diligence on, so we recommend you get started on that. Number 4, you need to investigate your current suppliers for EU compliance. I know a lot of Brown Shoe suppliers are in China, and due to some of those EU compliance issues, they're going to be looking downstream. So a lot of times it's up to Brown Shoe Company, for instance, to do the due diligence on their suppliers to make sure they're going to be complying with EU regulations and also country-specific regulations. As we mentioned, Germany has pretty strict runs by itself, so there'll be some different thresholds there depending on where you're sending your products. And lastly, we recommend you begin to coordinate your current logistics providers to shorten EU delivery windows. Mark mentioned, one of the biggest competitive advantages that you guys could leverage in the European Union market is basically just shortening the delivery time, making sure deliveries are on time on a regular basis, being more dependable in terms of your deliveries. That'll really help establish your brand in terms of business-to-business commerce. And that is pretty much our presentation. We're free to take questions if you have any.
So one question would be around how do we drive awareness of our brand? You didn't mention anything about the marketing strategy or how consumers would come to realize our brand.
So we mentioned a couple things up there. We didn't go too far into the weeds as far as like a digital marketing strategy or print marketing strategy or anything like that, just because we were trying to focus on kind of our market development and kind of strategically how we're going to be picking our markets. So as Mark mentioned, up in these macro factors, especially for a lot of Western Europe, these are things you want to emphasize more so. We're not really going to tell you how to emphasize them, unfortunately, just due to the prioritization we had in our case. But the European Union, that's not going to be one of those places where you go and say, we're #1 JD Power and Associates, we've won all these awards, we've done all these things. Those types of consumers are much more focused on the entire supply chain, the entire product process. They tend to be a little bit more progressive in terms of their social climate. So they're more interested in things like that, and not necessarily like brand championing as far as we're #1, but more of making sure that you are a respectable brand using respectable practices.
Well, I agree with many of the conclusions that you have here. I've got just a couple of questions. When you put up the pie chart showing Germany with 80% naturalizer, 20% Sam Edelman, tell me about the research that you used to know that that heavily weighted towards naturalizer is accurate. That's a key point in my mind in this overall plan, and the presumption is that you've done the research to know that, in fact, Germans utilize function over style.
Right.
So tell me how you validate that, because it's a basic building block on this strategy.
Definitely. So I'll go ahead and take that question. So there is a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's called the CBI. It's based out of one of the Dutch countries. And then they each year they put out market industry reports for the footwear industry as a whole, and then they also go through country by country. So in general, for the German footwear industry, they really do put a lot of emphasis on form and function, and that's built out in a lot of the statistics they put there. And then they don't have too much emphasis on the fashion forward. The Germans are very a practical country, and that shows through the market reports. If you go look at the types of consumer spending that they're spending on that, I don't have exact numbers on my head, but it's in one of the reports we cited on there. It does go ahead and show that they do prefer their form and function. The 80 and 20, those aren't concrete numbers. You could obviously shift that to 75, 25, and things like that. But it's just a general breakdown where you should be emphasizing a lot more on the naturalizer brand, because the Germans do really just put a lot of emphasis on the function of the shoes and the comfort of it, rather than being on the hottest trend each season.
And then as a follow-up question, have you considered changing the brand name? Sam Edelman and Naturalizer have been successful brand names here in the U.S., but I think in your research, you gentlemen were investigating the faster cycle time, the fashion consciousness. Have you considered changing brand names?
So we didn't do too much investigation or discussion on that topic, but given the fact that the Brown Shoe Company as a whole is going to be doing a kind of different branding, different shift in terms of its overall strategy, this would honestly probably be the best time, and we just recently found that out. This would probably be the best time to begin pivoting some of your smaller brands as well, such as Sam Edelman and Naturalizer, especially if you're going to be getting into some of those high fashion markets in Paris or in London. That Sam Edelman brand. That may come off as something as a bit of a cheaper, because its price point is a little bit cheaper than some of those other brands that occupy those markets. So maybe rebranding to kind of emphasize some other factors from that brand would be well thought out and a good opportunity to do that there. The Naturalizer brand, we really think that value in markets like Germany, markets like the Eastern Core, we don't really see a pressing need or an apparent need to really change the entire brand as a whole, but really emphasizing it's affordable, its function is comfortable for your long day. Again, high turnover in these markets, and they're really looking for cost efficient but still a little bit of fashion. And we think the Naturalized brand, as it stands, will serve well in that role, and we don't see any pressing reasons to change that brand.
So I agree with your assumption that the Germany definitely have some loyal comfort wearers in the women's, particularly with women. But one thing that always comes up is that they're very also loyal to their domestic brands. They have very long-term, they've grown up with these European brands. And so how would you, or did you discuss, how would you approach or introduce a brand made in China, made with comfort, But how are you going to sell that in the German market when you have so many competitors that are domestic brands?
So I'll go different as well. If we go back to the market share we had, it's a very small market share that you need. It's a very attainable goal, so we don't feel like actually capturing those is going to be too hard. As far as kind of selling yourself and selling the brand, as Mark mentioned earlier, they really do care about having like a eco-friendly country or eco-friendly brand, really caring about the entire supply chain going on there. So if you can emphasize at some point that it's a friendly company, that everything's done in good order with all compliance in there, and as Garrett mentioned earlier, don't really tote like, we're the most comfortable shoes in the world, something like that. Kind of be more realistic. The European market as a whole really do care about forwardness and being upfront and not having a facade of a lot of superlatives going forward. So we feel like something strong like that can really push forward the brand as a whole there. And with the German market as a whole, again, we need about a 0.200.
It's a little bit higher. So
Slightly higher.
0.03% or something like that.
Yeah, but that, again, that's also going to be about just around 15,000 women a year buying your shoe for the first couple of years. So we feel like it's a very attainable goal. And as we talked about earlier in the SWOT analysis, there's a giant trend towards market centralization in Germany, a lot of mergers and acquisitions for a lot of the shoewear companies. So we feel like as that's going on, people are going to be kind of switching brand alliances between like parent companies as well. So kind of getting in there and taking a small market share like that shouldn't be too difficult of a task.
Another thing to mention on the German market specifically, and actually a lot of the EU, Mark did mention that we're going to have origin mandatory labeling, origin labeling becoming mandatory in the European Union. So, given that most of your manufacturing is in Southeastern Asia and China right now, this may be a time to evaluate if that's going to have a negative impact on consumer preferences in these European markets, and if it works out where that may it may be financially viable to actually shift operations. If you think that's really going to build your brand recognition that much more in the European market, that may be an avenue to consider. Also, I mean, we didn't dive too far into this avenue, but he did mention that the German market involves a lot of M&A work right now, and one possible avenue you could do is actually acquiring a German brand that is well recognized, and maybe supplanting your naturalizer brand in Germany with that German recognized brand. So you go straight in there with the naturalizer strategic initiatives, but you immediately have a German brand working under your name, and that would probably build customer loyalty much more quickly than establishing Naturalizer as a standalone brand there.
And then you didn't really mention the Nordic region. Did that come into your analysis at all?
So unfortunately, the data that we used for this included a lot of the European Union. We had data for every country, but actually a lot of the Nordic countries specifically and a couple other smaller countries around Europe, a lot of their macro level economic data, especially in the footwear industry, is actually confidential, so we didn't have access to those numbers. So they weren't available in the numbers that we used to calculate this table. There were reports that we could have purchased for like $18,000 that I think would have had some good proxies for that type of information for those countries. But given our our short time frame
and your limited budget,
given our time frame, we thought this was a solid mix of countries. I mean, we've got 4 good markets to break into, so we think there's plenty of opportunity in those alone. But Nordic may be an avenue to investigate.
good job.
I've traveled to Europe many, many times, and as I know, the fashion capital has shifted from Paris to Milan. You've got Italy listed here under low growth, but at the same time, I would expect, as Milan being the fashion capital, that there would be opportunities for some market promotion. And I would expect that you would draw representatives from the fashion industry, at least for footwear, from all around Europe into Milan. So tactically, what's your thought about participating in trade shows, fashion expos that would exist in Milan or perhaps even Paris? And what would you expect to draw from the investment there?
Right. So one of the reasons that we didn't really consider Italy as a whole is it's actually such a low growth, it's actually negative growth